Construction on Hawks Nest Tunnel began in June of 1930. This tunnel was being constructed to send water from the New River in West Virginia, carry it 3 miles through Gauley Mountain to a hydroelectric plant that was going to be used to operate an alloy plant in Alloy, West Virginia. This project started at the height of the Great Depression when many people were looking for work. West Virginia was hit especially hard during the Great Depression, with the coal industry taking a huge hit before the Depression even officially started. Union Carbide was the company overseeing this project, and their company was not overly affected by the Great Depression, thus making this job opportunity very promising and a source of hope for many people. Most people coming and looking for work in the town of Gauley Bridge, West Virginia, were from out of town. Many residents of the city already had jobs at the numerous factories located in the area, so migrant workers flooded the region when this job opportunity was announced, at least 2/3 of them being African American workers. African Americans were considered lucky to be able to receive this job in mining, even though the conditions were less than favorable and it was extremely hard labor. Within the African American community during the Great Depression, income dropped by 50% and unemployment rose to 50%, even reaching 75% in some communities. When compared to the overall national unemployment rate of 25%, it is shown that African Americans were at a great disadvantage and felt the effects of the Great Depression even before it began, and continued to struggle after the Depression was officially over. Most African Americans were not relieved of the detriments of the Great Depression until the New Deal was fully implemented. These people came from all over to try and get a job working on Hawks Nest Tunnel, not knowing the environmental tragedy that was to follow. Here's a personal account of someone who worked in the tunnel for 5 weeks.
My name is Walter Kincaid. I worked in the tunnel 4 or 5 weeks. Every day I hear of someone dying with silicosis. I worked until I got sick, and the doctor told me that it was silicosis. And he also told me that anyone that worked as much as 24 hours would not be living 15 years. I think something should be done for our wives and family after we are gone.
This incident at Hawks Nest Tunnel has been considered America's greatest environmental tragedy, with Union Carbide also being responsible for the world's worst environmental tragedy 40 years later with the Bhopal gas leak.
The Hawks Nest Tunnel Valley, known as the Chemical Valley of the World, houses many different chemicals, with the most dangerous being silica. In this specific tragedy, silica was inhaled by many of the workers as silica dust, and since the workers were not given proper safety equipment, most were exposed to very high levels of silica dust in only a short amount of time. This exposure can lead to silicosis, a potentially deadly disease that affects the lungs.
Breathes. Silica crystals flow into his mouth and nose and down the air passages deep into the lungs. The tiny crystals enter the small, fragile air sacs, where oxygen is absorbed into the blood. Immune system cells, called macrophages, engulf and try to dissolve the crystals, but they are unable to. Over time, more and more crystals build up inside the macrophage cells. The macrophages carry the silica into the walls of the lung, where they die. Scar tissue forms around the dead cells and spreads as more cells die. This damage can continue even after the exposure to silica stops. Eventually, so much scar tissue forms that the lungs can no longer function.
According to official reports, 476 men died from silicosis as a result of working on Hawks Nest Tunnel. Many people speculate, however, that this number is closer to 700 to 1,000 deaths because of the people who potentially had silicosis but were never officially diagnosed. More than 3/4 of the workers who died from silicosis were African Americans. Many of the workers who were exposed experienced acute silicosis, which can occur as early as a few weeks after exposure. At the time that this tragedy occurred, there were no limits in effect on the amount of silica dust that could be inhaled with minimal health risks. Following this tragedy, however, regulations were put into place to help increase worker safety. The publicity of Hawks Nest Tunnel increased awareness and the use of dust suppression and respiratory protection use among workers exposed to silica. In 1938, the United States Department of Labor released a film called Stop Silicosis, aimed at preventing occupational disease and to encourage employers to comply to dust control methods.
But let's hear from Miss Perkins herself.
After a year of work, the National Silicosis Conference Committee has just made its report of findings and recommendations, and I feel it to be my duty to make this report available to the working people of the United States and to their employers by every available method. This report shows how silicosis occurs, where it occurs, and what the disease is, and it makes recommendations for its practical control. Above all, the report emphasizes that these control measures, if conscientiously adopted and applied, that silicosis can be prevented.
By the end of 1937, a total of 46 states had passed laws relevant to workers who had developed silicosis. Many of these laws incorporated workers' compensation as well. In 1997, the International Agency for Research on Cancer upgraded crystalline silica to a Group 1 human lung carcinogen. Then, in 2000, the U.S. National Toxicology Program moved silica into the known to be a human carcinogen category. Finally, in 2003, a study by OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and NIOSH, which is the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, showed the relationship between crystalline silica and several respiratory and autoimmune diseases. The most recent development with silica has come from new OSHA standards issued on March 24th of 2016. These new standards will be implemented on June 23rd of 2016, and they greatly reduce the amount of silica dust that workers can be exposed to on the job. This also means that employers are required to implement controls and work practices that reduce worker exposure. They are also required to limit access to high exposure areas, provide training and respiratory protection when controls are not enough, as well as offer medical examinations to those workers who are highly exposed. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration estimates that these standards will save the lives of more than 600 workers each year and prevent more than 900 cases of silicosis each year.
Today, approximately 2 million workers are potentially exposed to occupational silica. Anyone working in mining, construction, tunnel work, masonry, sandblasting, glass manufacturing, ceramic work, steel industry work, quarrying, or stone cutting is at risk for silicosis. Current initiatives include the America Silicosis Initiative, which involves organizations from all of the Americas, including North, Central, and South America, and includes respective ministries of health, World Health Organization, Pan American Health Organization, International Labor Organization, and National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. In the United States, a current initiative is an active silicosis surveillance system put into place by the New Jersey Department of Health and Senior Services. This describes the magnitude and characteristics of silicosis to implement and evaluate the strategies of interventions in reducing silica rates in New Jersey. Although many studies have been conducted over the effects of silica dust inhalation, the U.S. mining industry continues to deny hazards associated with silica exposures while keeping it away from the public.